I'd like to touch on some of the positives, at least, Rob. The midfield, this new experimental midfield combination that Hanneke Meyer has put his trust in, seems to be paying off. Jesse Kriel and Damien Delendi, I mean, standout players, I guess, in both tests. The box scrum was very good on Saturday. That's very encouraging.
Yes, it was. It's certainly the big revelation this season has been the form of that. Well, you can't call them all Sharks anymore because most of them have now left the Sharks. But the old all Sharks front row, Beast Bismarck and Yanni du Plessis, all of them have definitely upped their games. Bismarck du Plessis, I think, is playing in a general context, apart from his scrummaging, which is obviously significant as well because he's a big individual. But his general play has been superb. But the box set piece, as you say, has looked at very worst incredibly solid, which is a comfort going to Northern Hemisphere conditions where the scrummaging ethic is quite sort of well entrenched, and you want to have a good solid scrum. And Yanni du Plessis for me on Saturday was playing possibly his best test match in a long time before sadly he had to go off with a bit of a knee problem. He's joked that all they need to do is staple him together. Rather dubious diagnosis from a doctor, you'd think, but it shows his determination to want to actually be fit for the World Cup. And frankly, in a little bit of a surprise development, he has almost re-established himself as very much the number one tight head, and justified Hanneke Meyer's faith in him. And you know, good luck to him for that. So the scrum was incredibly solid while those players were on the field. Again, issues around the bench, because as soon as we changed, we know there was controversy around Trevor Nyakani being deemed to be the specialist loose head replacement. So in terms of IRB rules, they couldn't engage him as a third tight head prop, if you like, after we'd had those couple of injuries and so on. So that was a pity, and maybe one reason why the Boks couldn't close out the game was because we had to go to uncontested scrums, which is not great from a spectator point of view either. I think they need to perhaps revisit that. If you've got a versatile prop on the bench, surely you should be rewarded and be able to employ him feasibly as a tight head, because Nyakani can play there. But other than that, I mean, the two young locks earned a lot of praise again. I thought Eben Etzebeth and Lotte Jager fronted up superbly. And the midfield combination obviously emerging all the time and increasingly making a hot potato of the Jean de Villiers comeback issue, because you start thinking where do you fit Jean in, what is going to be the plan. It's going to be a very delicate one for Hanneke Meyer to balance. But I just love the sort of attacking focus and the confidence that a lot of the Bok youngsters, they really sort of took the game to New Zealand, especially in that first half, and that was a really good sign for the future.
So Garen, looking ahead to the World Cup, which is just around the corner, of course the dynamics and things change come knockout rugby time. Argentina getting thrashed by the Wallabies again, they could be good performers come World Cup. How do you see things sort of playing out? I mean, if the Springboks can't beat the All Blacks at Ellis Park, which is one of the happier hunting grounds, how do they expect to beat them?
Yeah, look, it's certainly going to be difficult. And we still have to remember that South Africa are the second best team in the world. If you think of all sport, whether it's individual or team, it should never really be a massive shock if the second best player or team in the world beats the top ranked team at home, under favourable conditions. So the fact that we got close isn't of great comfort to me. I wouldn't have been surprised if South Africa had won. We've got a much better record at Ellis Park than the All Blacks do. Yet they still won, and their team certainly wasn't the best combination they can put together. They're not shy at all to make wholesale changes. We saw two debutants, like you said, no Julian Sevier, a couple of players left behind, Dan Carter not even making the tour. Julian Sevier made the tour but didn't even play a second of the game. So they're not shy at all to mix and match, which I hope is what Hanneke Meyer does in part against Argentina. Like I said earlier, there's no way we can finish any better than third. Make some changes, get the youngsters accustomed to rugby at the highest level, even though it's in the comforts of Durban and against the weakest team in the competition. So how does that translate then to the Rugby World Cup? We've got a really tough draw. We've got to get past, I think, Scotland and Samoa with the two toughest matches in our pool phase. If we finish top, then we play whoever comes second in the group that contains England, Australia and Wales. I certainly think we'd be underdogs against England at home. Australia, we've seen them beat us this year already. We might not be favourites to play against them. So we could well go out in the quarterfinal stage and won't even get to play in New Zealand in the semis if it all pans out that way. So, knockout rugby, very, very different to, Super Rugby, where bonus points are on offer for tries and that, because we're not specialists at scoring tries. So, that plays, I guess, a little bit into our favour. A lot of people obviously talking about the heavy conditions of the Northern Hemisphere, the scrums and the breakdown, and Flyff can kick the ball, being advantageous. But, I'm not sure. Pollard, to me, has gone off the ball a little bit. He's been a little bit disappointing, both at Super Rugby this year and in the few matches he's played. And, I think I'd like to see Alambi to see what he can do. He's performed well at the end-of-year tours in Europe. So I'd like to see him at home, see what he can do. It throws up another spanner in the works, obviously, if he plays incredibly well. We've still got Morné Steyn waiting in the wings. He's had really good performances this year in France. What can he offer? And I think Heineken May is a big Morné Steyn fan. I wouldn't be surprised if, it goes along on the tour. So, a lot of questions still to be answered. Unfortunately, time is, of the essence at the moment. We've only got 2 games against Argentina to go before we head off to the World Cup, and then, start obviously with a fairly easy game against Japan. But it's going to be all stations go from there, in building up to potential quarterfinal against an England or Australia, where anything can really happen.
Last question, Rob. Speaking of those 2 games against Argentina, I know that the studio analysts after the game touched on it. The Springboks seem to, I don't know if you want to call it, play a different brand of rugby, but they sort of play the All Blacks at their own game. They seem to be very attacking minded, and these 2 games against Argentina would be ideal to kind of sort of continue that momentum and what did you make of their sort of game plan on the day?
Yeah, you're right. The Springboks do seem to sort of revel in the sort of adrenaline of the occasion against the All Blacks, and then sometimes it sort of fades from them, as you say, when we play against teams where they almost sort of drag us down to their level. And the Argentinians are a classic case of doing that. With respect to them, they're a very tough nut to crack at times, especially when they've really got sort of a mental bee in their bonnets. But they tend to be quite sort of niggly, spoiling sort of side. So perhaps actually not the worst opponents to switch to now, because you want to have as much variety as possible before you go into a World Cup, and you'll play teams of various different sort of cultures and ethics and so on. So going straight from having played our 2 great rivals, Australia and New Zealand, and coming very close to beating both of them at the very least. I hope that South Africa still continue with a fairly expansive sort of ethic, because it's something they're clearly wanting to work on, and they should try to employ. But also, the Argentinians will do everything they can to sort of to slow the pace down and to drag the Boks into a fairly attritional sort of conflict. So Heineken May will have to sort of choose. As much as you'll be experimenting, maybe a little bit of a sort of a horses for courses side to play against them. But considering that they've had quite a big thumping from the Wallabies, even on their home soil over the last weekend, there's going to be pressure on the Boks to actually put them away quite convincingly. So I think the Boks will still stick to a fairly up-tempo brand of rugby.